So thank you everyone for joining today for our first episode of Scaling SaaS. Essentially, this webinar and the subsequent ones that we have will have leaders from different critical parts of SaaS companies talking about their experience and what to do and potentially what not to do as you're kind of scaling your company. So today we have Avtar Varma. Avtar is a seasoned operator who's led a number of revenue teams over the years from Datica to Sonar and now at Benchling, and essentially building go-to-market teams and in a hyper-growth motion. So, Avtar, thanks for joining today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
Um,
thanks for having me.
yeah, and so we'll just jump right into a few questions here for you.
Sure.
So, when it comes to kind of these scaling inflection points in your career, like tell me about, what was it like? What triggered the kind of acceleration and the growth, and when did you feel that moment like, hey, this is about to go to that next level? Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty cognizant decision in most of the organizations that I was working at, where we saw this shift from more of a bottoms up approach or PLG type sales motion to more of a sales-led sales motion, where we
Mm,
saw that there was a lot more kind of budget and less constraints if we were to go into the upmarket. And so instead of selling to individual contributors or small teams, really focusing on selling into the C-suite. And
yeah,
this was a conscious decision to invest more heavily into that kind of emotion. And it sounds really simple to just say like, oh yeah, cool, we're gonna go sell the enterprise and do more of a top-down approach. But it
yeah.
really takes a complete reorchestration of the go-to-market organization to align to kind of a MEDIC methodology or whatever methodology you're going to use to sell more top-down.
Sure. And I mean, so when you think about that, like what were some things that occurred in that process that you learned in your experience, but that you wish you'd seen coming, you know, in that growth mode?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. The things that come to mind are just some of the things I wish I knew, a few times ago doing this now. Number one is it's great to say that, like I was saying before, that we're going to switch over to a MEDIC methodology and re-architect our Salesforce instance or bring in these new tools. But it takes a really long time to actually reorchestrate the entire organization to this new methodology. It's not just you set it, put it in place, educate
Sure,
the team one time and move on. It takes, on average, I'd say like 12 to 18 months to really get the engine humming. And having that expectation off the bat and making sure that your leadership team, not just in sales, but across the entire organization, is aligned to that kind of time frame and that kind of investment is really critical.
mm,
And then the second thing I'd say is you really need to make sure that the strategy that's being kind of set forth by your CRO or your leadership team is embedded into the frontline sales management team. They're the ones that actually translate that strategy into actual execution. And if they're not
sure,
aligned and don't have that buy-in, then it's just not going to work.
sure. So as you kind of went through that, when you're scaling like that, you're really just trying to figure out how you can build repeatable sales motions, right? And so tell me more about that. Like how were you preparing and how did you know when you were ready for some of these GTM motions to be repeatable, scalable, and then, essentially have the team go and execute that type of similar rhythm and motion within the organization?
Yeah. So within the ops organization, I think the most critical thing is having an operating cadence or rhythm that's built out, spelled out, so everyone knows whether you're an SDR, a BDR, an AE, an SC, exactly what you're doing any day, week, month, quarter.
Mm,
There is this kind of built-in cadence, right? So most organizations I work with, it's like you have PG Mondays, right? So we're going to go and do your PG. Tuesday through Thursday is you're running your opportunities. Friday, you're prepping for the next week. They know, on week 3, you lock your forecast for the quarter. On week
mhm.
7, you do your first look at next quarter. From an ops perspective, we know that, week 2 of a quarter, we're doing a look back on the previous quarter, win-loss analysis, all of that, right?
Yeah,
So having that built-in rhythm that everyone knows what's expected of them when is super critical. That's the first thing. Second thing from an ops side would be having a really well orchestrated enablement function. And
Mm,
I've been super lucky the last few organizations I've worked with to work with world-class enablement teams. The RevLogic team has been amazing. Ariel Margulis kind of came over from sales engineering team to lead our enablement team here and has built that up from scratch. And what we've seen is by re-architecting our onboarding process and making sure that it's aligned to this enterprise sales motion, we've been able to bring down our ramp times, increase our
mm,
productivity, but you cannot scale without
yeah.
having that function built. And then the last two things I'd say, number one is data and analytics. So having data
Mm,
at your fingertips to be able to look at what's working, what's not. What are the specific metrics that matter for you, both from a leading indicator perspective, so number of meetings or NBMs or VO progression, to lagging indicators like obviously like bookings, churn, contraction, et cetera.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then final thing would be on the sales team, that frontline sales management team, right? So making sure that they're bought in, they understand the why, they are really on board
Mm,
because if the CRO is banging the drum of, really matters to have your champion built, your three Ys, your MVPs, all of those things, but that's not actually being pushed by the frontline sales management team, it's going to fall flat.
yeah. No, definitely. So what as you went through that and as you're still going through that right at Benchling, like were there any kind of false positives with the team in terms of readiness that you saw?
Yeah, some of the false positives, I mean, you start seeing things like, okay, an individual reps will be hitting their target, or a team will be hitting their target for a quarter, but
Hmm.
really it's done through heroics, right? Last week of the quarter, some big deal comes in and we hit the number. So on paper, it looks like great, you hit the target for the quarter, but
Yeah,
I don't want to call it luck, but it's like it's through these like gymnastics that you're having to do. You're having to make, the CRO is having to call a friend,
sure.
things of that nature. There's no regularity to it or predictability.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so back
You
on
get that discounting moment too at the end of the quarter, right?
exactly, right? I mean, customers know when they have more kind of the levers in their side of the negotiation.
Yeah,
So if you're able to build in that predictability to say, instead of this deal happening the last day of the quarter, what would it take to happen in month two? And
right.
working backwards from there.
Yeah,
That's when you start to see more of the predictability. And so that makes you feel like you're more ready to actually scale.
got it. Perfect, man. And then tell me more about some of these, like in your career, in these organizations that you scaled out. Tell me some of the challenges, some of the mistakes, some things that, you would just never do again, as you grow a business and go through hyper growth.
Yeah, a lot of things coming to mind in terms of mistakes I've made, but I'd say some of the big ones that I'll try to not recreate. Number one, when people think about RevOps, you typically think of like marketing, sales, CX operations, maybe enablements in there. But what's not talked about really often is having kind of a data analytics or BI function that's embedded into the organization. And this will typically sit with like the engineering team or the data science team. And in my experience, it's a really big mistake, right? That team is really good at the data engineering work, the analysis, the data science. What they're not good at typically, because they don't have the experience, is kind of understanding the needs of the business, the go-to-market perspective. And
Yeah,
so the amount of cycles you have to go through when you say like, hey, I need a dashboard that shows me XYZ pipeline progression over time. It will take you weeks or months to get something that is actually usable that you can
yeah,
gain some insight from, as opposed to if that person is embedded within the RevOps org that has that kind of business mindset, that go-to-market expertise, it just helps things move a lot faster.
sure.
So that's
No,
that's that's the first thing. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I said 100%. I've had the same exact experience. So, but it's number two, go ahead.
The second thing, and this goes back to expectation setting in terms of like how long this is going to take. Um, Putting in the leading indicator framework as an example of you need to have 10 meetings a week, you need to do this many PG calls on Monday, you need to have
Mm,
this many opportunities in progress in any given quarter. That's all great, and putting that in place will not solve the problem, right? Because what will happen is managers will come in that don't understand like the why behind it. They say, hey, Raj, you didn't hit your 10 meetings last week. What went
Mhm.
wrong? And they'll kind of beat you over the head with a stick and kind of yell at the scoreboard as opposed to diving deeper and getting an understanding for, okay, well, you didn't get your 10 meetings. Is that because you didn't call the right people? Your messaging is off. Your calendar is way out of whack because you have too many internal meetings. Like really trying to diagnose the problem. And again, going back to like having the right sales leadership team in place,
Yeah.
I've seen that fall flat where you bring in leaders that don't actually understand how to run this motion or run this playbook. They might be great reps somewhere else or great managers somewhere else, but if they haven't done this before or have some real strong desire to learn the playbook and put it in place,
Mhm.
that is something that a lot of organizations really struggle with.
Sure. So you mentioned this a couple of times now about data analytics, right? Essentially having that. Tell me more about the tools that you've used, or maybe you've built a lot of things internally or on the back of other platforms and software solutions. But let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So for me, I care less about the tool than about like what it actually gives me. So done a lot of work with Tableau.
Sure.
I'm a big proponent for Sigma computing. I think it's super powerful and gives, lay people like me that don't know how to write SQL anymore, the ability to actually manipulate data.
Yeah.
But I care less about that than the ability to like have the output of, I want to have a single place where all of my reps, sales leaders, all the way up to the CRO and the CEO can
Mhm.
go every morning when they're looking, having their cup of coffee to look at everything from pipeline that was created yesterday, last week, last month, to how that's progressing, to how are reps spending their time. Are they actually, spending time in meetings with the same person every single day, every single week?
Sure.
Are they meeting, high and wide in the organization? Where are we able to start spot seeing if there are customers that are showing signs, propensity to either buy more or potentially churn and contract?
Yeah.
Being able to have one place where everyone's looking at the same data and it's all validated. And so there's no argument of, well, your number is different than my number, so which one is right is
It's
critical.
all about the data, and I think that's something in my career, same situation. And, it's really important to give the right, constituents in their, whether it's, senior management or sales teams members or SDRs, the right data, right? What they need to see and make it really digestible, very easy. So just in a matter of like 3 to 5 minutes, they're able to understand what they need to understand about the metrics of the company, right? And the data doesn't lie. So, kind of last thing here for us, then we'll open up to some questions if we have some on the from the attendees. Um, you're let's say you're advising, a company just raise a Series A or Series B. They've got a product fit. They've got the case studies. They're ready to scale. They're before they start scaling and kind of just hiring headcount. Like, what are some of the building blocks and the foundational elements that they need to have in place to make sure that that growth investment is de-risked and has the highest probability to win?
Yeah. So I'm gonna sound like a broken record now, but going back to like the data component, right? I think
Yeah,
CRM hygiene is a non-negotiable, right?
yeah,
And being able to take that data, not just like, okay, it sits in Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever, but it's in a back-end data warehouse that you can actually do analytics on top of and see longitudinal trends, and that you
yeah,
have, it doesn't necessarily need to even be a team. It can be one person in your ops team that is really data
sure,
savvy, that's able to surface those insights. That's the first thing. Second thing, I'd say once you're at past 5 reps, you probably need an enablement function. And again, this can be one person.
yeah,
Their responsibilities are making sure that there is consistency across the organization in terms of when you hire a new person, how are they onboarded? How do they learn about, what your organization does, how you go to market, what the processes are, but then also builds out your first meeting deck, if you're using things like 3 Ys or MVPs or all of that collateral is kind of
sure,
consolidated into that function.
yeah,
Then last thing is just having that operating rhythm I was talking about, right? So everyone, as they come in, as you scale the organization, you really have a clear cut understanding of who is expected to do what when, because if you don't have those kind of processes in place, um, you're adding fuel on by adding investment, but you really need to tune the engine first, right? Because without process and discipline, growth just kind of amplifies chaos.
Hey, let me ask you something else that wasn't we didn't discuss this prior, but like in terms of the DNA of the right kind of sales leadership, right, and revenue leadership, when you're at that point where you need to have these consistent, repeatable motions and rhythm and data so key and everything, like what do you look for? What kind of DNA of an individual do you need?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of like the ICE methodology, right? When you're going out and hiring, uh, I think if you've heard of this, right? So it's intelligence, coachability,
Yeah,
um, experience, and I'm forgetting the other C off the top of my head, but um, I think by testing for like, okay, do they have the experience to sell into this market to lead this kind of a team? Are they just curious, right, and coachable?
yeah,
Do they actually want to learn if they don't necessarily have the experience, but they're really leaning into the process? And do they put data at the forefront of their process, right? Do they really think about not only just like, okay, what's the surface level data and insights tell you, but what are those deeper facts that you can dive into and then taking
mhm,
insights from that? And
yeah,
all of the really amazing, sales leadership that I've worked with in the past really focuses on those components.
sure. Great. I mean, I think the big theme is data. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's having the data, exposing the data, having the right information at your fingertips quickly, and then being able to make that actionable so that you can actually take actions on it and have the whole organization around the same set of data points and kind of really get that penetrated within the revenue organization. Let me open this up for any questions that anyone has. Let me see if we have something in chat here right now. Um, let's see. Attendees, if you guys want to fire off any questions for us, let us know. Here's one for you. Can you give us a couple of suggestions on how you got your C-suite? It says E-suite, but the executive suite on board with the 12 to 18 months transformation to get to a growth strategy.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any one real silver bullet here for you that you're just like, you say this line and everyone's going to agree 12 to 18 months. I think in my experience, there's always a little bit of doubt in that, okay, it's not going to actually take 12 to 18 months. You probably do it in six and you're just saying 12 to 18 months to give you some buffer. But when you start laying out, like, okay, what actually needs to change? It's not just, okay, we're going to buy some new tools and re-architect our Salesforce instance, but walk them through, okay, we have to either hire an entirely new team or switch out our existing team for people that have done this before. We need to re-architect the ratios of AEs to BDRs to SDRs to SCs. We need to build out XYZ new content, new first meeting deck. We need to start talking to our existing customer base to figure out what are the actual use cases and value propositions that matter. If you can kind of lay out all the things that need to be done and put some realistic timelines around them, it starts to be pretty clear that this is not a quick 3 6
Yeah.
month effort.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think the level of ex transparency and exposure of that to make sure everyone is aligned on the leadership side of the organization is so key. That's where things can start to fail pretty quickly if everyone's not on the same page. So we say that all the time with customers that we work with. Another question for you. Did you hire a data scientist specifically for the sales dashboard, or did you use some existing staff and cross-train them on kind of what your needs were for the business?
Yeah, so starting off, we just used our internal team in terms of like from an ops perspective, but the best people that I've hired for this function specifically have either data visualization backgrounds, right? So they're used to working in Tableau, Looker, Sigma, or have a deep expertise in like data science. I would rather hire someone that has more go-to-market or business experience though that can do the data visualization than a pure
Or
data scientist, because ultimately data scientist people like want to do really interesting like data science work, and that's not exactly what we're looking for in an ops function.
Right. It might not have the right outputs that you need to perform, from a
Yeah.
revenue standpoint. Okay, Avtar, fantastic. I really appreciate your time today. That was
Yeah,
great.
thanks for having me.
And
Appreciate
yeah,
it.
and thank you everyone else who joined us. This will be recorded, sent out as well too. So if there's anything else you need from Think and Grow, please let us know and look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks,
Thank you.
Avtar. Have a good one.
You too.